Thank you very much, Stephen. It's still a bit moving when you prepare. I'm too small to be here. When you prepare an event for 1 year and a half, and then it happened. So, well, everybody, thank you again, Stephen, and thank you, Liv, because it sends to you also if I am here. You've just seen me. I'm Isabelle Collet. I'm from the Faculty of Education, and as you know, according to political media, social commentators, artificial intelligence will have revolutionary application in education. Maybe for the better, personalization of learning, adaptive learning, etc. Maybe for the worse, cheating on exams, loss of fundamental learning, replacement of teacher. As soon as a computer appears, they say the computer will replace teacher. It was in the 80s. Obviously, it did not happen. Then when the MOOC appears, they say it will replace teachers. Obviously, it not appears. Maybe AI going to replace teacher, I don't know. The world of education discovered AI when in last November when ChatGPT appears. So now if you speak to most of my colleagues, when you say AI in education, they understand ChatGPT in education. But of course, it's not only ChatGPT. And maybe ChatGPT is the tree hiding the forest. So this is why today we organize this panel. So I will introduce, no, they will introduce themselves on this panel. So Neil, up to you.
Well, hello, everybody. So my name is Neil Heiser. Currently a PhD student and teaching assistant at the University of Geneva, and I work mostly on social interaction between examiners and examinees. So that can be students and teachers, doctors and patients, but also psychologists and patients as well. I'm interested in how social interaction is impacted by AI. What are the benefits of AI in social interaction? Especially regarding bias related to communication. And that's what I work what I work about. And I also, outside of academia, I work with AI with a startup.
Thank you. Biljana?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Like this? Okay. So I'm Biljana Petreska from Ritter-Zahony. I'm an associate professor in computer science at the pedagogical school, so at the HTV, a Swiss university of teacher education. I also teach computer science to high schoolers in the Gymnase d'Yverdon. But before this, the reason why I'm here today is that I was a researcher in artificial intelligence applied to computational neuroscience. So with my background in AI, my main research interest now is basically AI education. So how do you teach artificial intelligence? I do believe that the pervasive nature of AI will make it on all the school curricula. And I mean, even if the panel before disagreed, I do think that one of the ways to successful coexistence with artificial intelligence is education. My research focuses on what aspects of AI do we actually need to teach, and also how to teach them. So what are the must-knows, and how do you explain this to high schoolers or even younger kids? I think it's important for students to understand how these tools work, how AI works, in order to assess the various risks that come with using AI tools. And I believe that it is this kind of deep understanding that goes beyond the user skills, not just how to prompt ChatGPT, that it will empower people to use AI responsibly and make informed choices. So in our lab, we developed learning resources such as educational games and frameworks that address the basic principles of AI, and a lot of effort goes into making these resources accessible, to a non-mathematical audience. After GPT, we started thinking about what AI tools actually mean to the classroom. You know, how does AI change the teacher's practices, the student practices, the assessments? And it turns out that for generative AI, critical thinking is critical.
Thank you. And now Simon.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simon Collin. I'm a professor at the University of Quebec in Montreal, Canada. I'm also holder of the Canada Research Chair on Digital Equity and Education. So I mainly study technology and education, more precisely the relationship between technology and education and the issues that can arise from this relationship. So from this point of view, even though I don't consider myself a specialist of AI in education, AI is very interesting because it tends to amplify, renew, modify some equity issues that we know of education and technology. So that's why I'm interested in. I would say that a part of the field of EdTech, educational technologies, tends to see technology as a driver of progress, revolution, as Isabel was saying. In the reality of it, technology can definitely find its place in education, but under some condition, under some circumstances, and it also raises issues. So all of my work is to focus on these issues.
And Simon will give the public talk tomorrow at Unimai about AI in education. It's mostly for the secondary future teacher who are working at the EUFE in Geneva, but of course you're welcome, but there is an overlap with AI2S2, so I don't want to make too much advertising because of the conference. So my first question will be, of course, we'll start, of course, with ChatGPT. It caught the attention of the entire educational community. And I think for my colleague at the Faculty of Education, when you speak about AI, most of them think about student cheating in the exam, and that is a problem, and we can't teach as we used to be. We can do our exam as we used to be, and frankly, most of them don't see any good bright side of the artificial intelligence. So this is my first question for you. First, of course, AI is much broader than ChatGPT, and in what area of education do you think AI can bring benefits? And I first give the floor to Neil, because she was the first person in my faculty I heard talking about the benefits of ChatGPT. So up to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think the question is it really just some aspects, or is it like all the aspects in teaching and education in general? AI can have a lot of advantages for the teacher perspective, but also for the student perspective. What's quite important is, like, in this teacher perspective, it can help for course materials and course preparation. Just to give you a quick example, it can help outline a course structure, or it can also help you prepare some exams and also generate exercises for your students. In this sense, it's quite helpful because it reduces the amount of time that you spend on preparing course material and teaching. And it can also help you reduce the time that you spend on tasks that you can use otherwise for other and more aspects of teaching. When we look at the student side, there are also like a lot of advantages. Advantages are in preparation for interviews, for example, if students want to apply for internships, or if they want to apply for scholarships, especially AI and chatbots based on AI can help students create outlines, help them in structuring sentences, can generate ideas, and can also help in defining the necessary elements that funding institutions require, for example, and can also help in interview preparation, as I said before, for example, generating 10 potential or 20 potential questions interviewers could or are likely to ask for internships positions. I always tell my students that AI is a friend, and I tell them that for several reasons. AI, and especially chatbots based on AI, can offer a personalized learning experience. This is quite important because we know that students have different knowledge, have different knowledge about different subjects, so some are more advanced than others. And ChatGPT is quite helpful in ChatGPT or other AI. ChatGPTs are quite helpful in helping in the learning experience itself because it provides immediate feedback. Immediate feedback and being accessible 24/7 is important for students who are disadvantaged. So students can be disadvantaged because they either come from a socio-economic status that is lower, so they do not have parents that have been in higher education before, so they have to take some time to get to know into the environment, what are the norms, what are the performance expectancies, how does the educational environment work. ChatGPT can help in those situations. Also, if you look at another example, a lot of students have, for example, part-time jobs. And what's quite useful about that is that at the university there are some office hours, but often we have students that cannot come to the office and ask questions, so because they have like a second job or even they have children, so they do have the possibility outside the university 24/7 to learn material and to have immediate feedback. What's also good about this feedback is that students can learn at their own pace and convenience. Sometimes it happens that students are faster in learning and sometimes students are not that fast in learning. There are a lot of discrepancies between students, and that's where AI in education is really, really helpful because it adjusts to the specific knowledge of each student and can then adapt the teaching process. So students who are behind, but not because of internal reasons, but because they're in their life, in their environment, because they're disadvantaged for other reasons, they can actually achieve more through chatbots like, chatbots based on AI. So that's that's like one of the main advantages that is there.
Yeah. So a lot of the things I will say will sound like Neely is talking. The range of possibilities is really vast. You know, AI is a sufficiently general problem-solving solution that it can be applied to any area of education. So AI, the first promise of AI is that it will personalize the learning path of each child or each student. It can definitely boost engagement through immediate feedback. You know, it accelerates this feedback loop with the teacher, and it can help creativity by providing a first draft or implementation. You know, like there are no more blank pages anymore. ChatGPT solved that problem, and I do think it has a potential of, help making learning more accessible for and more inclusive for children with special needs, for sure. And there are already good AI solutions, so not ChatGPT, but other edtech solutions that help children learn to read, write, or do simple calculations. As a teacher, AI could help me better differentiate and adapt my teaching to the different levels of the students. And by interacting with the tool, they can have specific feedback, to answers they need. I can only answer one question at a time. That's true. And, AI can answer all the questions of all the kids at one point of time. It could help bring the classroom into their homes, and allow them to continue asking questions outside of my working hours. They can interact with the tool at night if they need to do so. Now, let me just, take a teacher's perspective and let you tell me how I feel about it as a teacher. I teach computer science in high school. So this basically means that my role as a teacher will change. I will be less of a knowledge holder. I will be more of a supervisor. And the bottleneck in education is definitely time, the time we have with the students. The more time I have for each student, the more the student learns. And that I've witnessed, that's for sure. So AI will allow me to save a lot of my teaching time that I can potentially use, to help students more individually. And that's what will happen in the first place. In the short run, I will have more time to spend with each student individually. But then AI scales very well, and I would probably be able to supervise more students than I can teach right now. So as we live in a neoliberal society, that means that in the long run, my classroom size will rise. I will have more students to teach to. And I do think that in the end, I will have less time for each student than I do now, even though in the first place, it did help me, and it did have this promise of helping me save time. So the fundamental difference between humans, we humans and machines, to me is our relationship to meaning. And I wonder if my work will still feel meaningful, in this other paradigm. So what I'm trying to say is that sometimes by introducing new solutions, we create new problems. So as a society, we need to ask ourselves what kind of education we want for our children. Do we want cheap and automated training, or an environment that values human-to-human interaction? For me, it's about finding the right balance. We talked about balance. I know it's not the easiest way to go, but AI can enhance education and can take it further, but let's not forget the humans that are in the loop. So whenever there's an AI up there, the first question we need to ask is, do we need this? And even if we need this, do we want this? That's the second question the AI needs to pass, is do we actually want this solution, even if we need it? So yeah.
Thank you. So in addition to the points that were raised by Nile and Biljana, I would like maybe to tackle here the organizational advantages that sometimes are said about AI and education, not only the pedagogical advantages. So to this point, AI can probably help reorganizing in some way, in some positive way, the teachers' workload. For example, it can take into account or take in charge some repetitive administrative tasks that are usually not pedagogical as such, but demanded by the pedagogical activity of teachers. For example, follow-up students' attendance, let's parents know about the attendance of students, maybe help in some ways, lesson planning, teaching resources, grading as well. So when AI, or if AI is able to take in charge of this kind of repetitive administrative tasks, that's more time they could give to students in the classroom teaching. And I would say if it were the case, probably most teachers would like it, because being with students in the classroom and teaching is usually what drives them into the profession. A turn off is precisely the administrative workload that comes with it. But the most initiatives at the moment are rather at the organization of the school system at large, not so much at the scale of the teacher. And here AI can potentially give a more accurate and updated view of the different components of the educational systems. At the moment, in many educational systems, or at least in Quebec, data are not gathered in one place. Schools have some data, the ministry has some data, but they are a bit scattered around. So it's not easy to put them together, get a portrait of how it's going and its evolution over time. So here AI can be interesting because it's better when you know about a situation than when you don't fully know about it. It can also help to allocate and monitor more efficiently the financial, material, and human resources, depending on the needs of each school. For example, Quebec is currently experiencing a strong teacher shortage, so we don't have enough teachers in the classrooms. We didn't need AI to know that, we knew it was coming. But I think if we had a constant documentation of this trend about teacher enrollment, teacher departure, then probably the political response to it would have been more timely and more efficient than what it is now. Still, I want to finish by saying that these, by raising some cautious notes, two actually. First, what I talk about here is mainly what could be. It's not really what's happening at the moment. As Neil Selwyn would say, he's a researcher in my field, there is a difference in education in general and in society as well, I think, between the state of the art of technology and education versus the state of the actual. The reality of education is much more constraining than, you know, the potential we think about technology, so that when we try to implement it, it's not that easy to do. There is a lack of funding, there is a lack of time, and so on. The other cautious note that I want to raise is that those are laudable projects, initiatives, and so on. Even though they are presented like that, sometimes AI is used for other kind of projects or policies, for example, to raise competition within schools, to increase accountability, to do budget cuts, and so on. And this has nothing to do anymore with the quality of pedagogy, but really with the management of the educational system in ways that doesn't help really the teaching and the learning ultimately. So these are potentials, but the way it is implemented is yet to be seen.
So do you think we need to teach our future teacher how to use ChatGPT or how to use AI? I asked, for example, to Biljana, who work in HEPV, for example.
Do we need teachers to learn
to integrate how to work, how to work with AI in the initial education?
I don't think it would hurt. I think you know it's a good thing. It's out there. It's good to know what it's doing, how it's doing it. It's better to embrace it rather than, you know, fight it, I guess.
Not be frightened by
when it's there, I guess. But I wouldn't like throw, I don't know if you said that in English, like throw the stone to the person that is not doing it, because as teachers, we do value our, you know, freedom of teaching. So, you know, if a teacher comes to me and says, can you help me with it? Or, you know, we have, or school comes and says, like, we have teachers that want to learn about it, sure, go ahead. But if they don't, I think it's important to know it's out there. But I wouldn't be as enthusiastic about saying you really have to revolutionize the way you're teaching. And because, I mean, we need to be realistic. Like, some of my colleagues still don't use email. So at one point, like, we can be, you know, there are some people out there that will be like, they've already done it, actually. Those that want to do it, they've already been out there. For the others, it's more of a prevention thing rather than, you know, trying to learn.
No, you wanted to add something?
Just there is a question in the audience that is related to this topic, so
okay,
we
go
can
on.
tackle it. The question is, to really reap the benefits of AI in the classroom, we will need to train faculty, so what we have mentioned, and people who, those people are already trained to use other learning tools. Do you have any specific recommendation to engage faculty in incorporating AI tool in classes in addition to the existing one?
I'm gonna respond like what I wanted to say before. I'm gonna answer this at the same question at the same time. I just wanted to say that I think in education in general, we have some educational purposes, and I think as a society in education, or I think our duty will be to teach about AI and to teach about AI and how to use it, because it has so many opportunities. There's still, we know there's still a lot that has to be improved, but if you look back, like in the last years and especially last month, we see that that AI can do a lot of great things. I think in education, one solution could be that not every teacher is specialized in AI, but there could be like specific courses about AI, like just generating different knowledge and how to use it, and then teach that to students, so that students can at the end apply it themselves. But then also we have to look at different students and how they perceive AI, because if you look at, for example, behavior change related to AI, what we can see in behavior change, we have different stages of change, and they tell us that to change a behavior, which in the sense would be using AI, you already have to know what is AI, you already have to try, then you have to be motivated, then you can have to do the try and error, and depending on where the student is at the moment, so maybe, for example, no knowledge or tried and it didn't work out, then we could specialize teaching about it. So it could be really enhancing underlying mechanism and motivation, but also very specialized to the students.
Okay. As for the question of is the faculty trained for ChatGPT or AI in general, not yet. It's coming step by step. But my question is really, what is the content of the training? Most of the time, or the risk is actually to train the faculty, but even the students, for technical skills, like, for example, how one technology functions or how to use it. That's interesting, but for me, the finality of teaching faculty, students about technology is really to teach that it is not neutral, so that it is political. It has some implications on education in society as well. This is, I think, relevant particularly for students because they will be citizens then, and they need also to be aware of that. So to teach students, faculty about these issues, about the fact that technology is political, of course, they need to get some basis about how it functions, how to use it, but not to forget that I think the meaningful training is really the one that goes to the implications of using technology in their daily life, but also at more general levels like democracy and so on.
Maybe you have another question on this topic, Laure? No, so you can move on.
Just to say, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so we at the Pedagogical School, we are lucky to be several past AI researchers. So we've been doing lifelong learning, AI at the Pedagogical School, and what is and we also been approached by the Canton of Neuchâtel to talk to all their high school level, not just the high school, but that level of age teachers. And so what we did is we sat around and really thought hard about what can we do in like 1 hour. And basically we thought what was important is to understand a little, open up a little the black box. If you don't know what you're dealing with, you're afraid of it, and you don't know, you can't argue about it. If you know what's going on, it's much easier to have well-argued discussions. So we opened up a little bit the black box, and then we touched upon a little on the user skill, but we said that's not really important. You do need to, we try to have a bit of a balanced thing, like we start very tech savvy, and in the end we kind of delve deep into the risks of it. So to have a bit of a complete picture of the thing, not to have one point or the other. But that's just the very first stepping stone. And what is nice in education is that we have a lot of lifelong learning courses that we offer, and AI is one of them and has been one of them since several years.
Okay, there is a question coming from the audience. Could you please illustrate the concrete usage of AI in the teaching learning process with focus on pedagogical enrichment and improving critical thinking and media information literacy skills and competencies?
Yeah, concrete example about critical thinking. I think what can be done, what I'm doing with my students. I create different prompts and I have different exercises, and then I ask my students to put the prompts in the chat booth and then to work with the exercises in the course. That could be a direct example, because in my prompt I define how to give specific feedback to students, which errors are common, what is important to look at, etc. So that's a direct solution that you can do during the class, but that you can also do outside the class. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, one example I do with my future teachers is they're they are oriented towards teaching French. It's to take a text from a real text from students with mistakes, and first to try to ask ChatGPT to correct the text, to see how it comes back, then to try to apply a grid with different criteria. And to see how they can apply the grid to the text, and then to improve the text according to different comments, feedbacks, and that could be the ones of a teacher. And then they do that. Their experience are usually mitigated. Some were impressed, some were not, and usually they tend to stop after the first prompt. They ask the question, they phrase it the way they think it's clear, and they stop here and see the results. So then we come back on the different prompts and see, okay, what are the prompts that you used? And of course, the different prompts give different results, and then they understand that prompts are an important part of the quality of the product that they got. So that's one example.
And maybe a question that complement the previous one is, which competencies and skills are critical to be taught in classroom?
Well, I said it was, at least for me, it's critical thinking. Sure. How do you teach critical thinking? I'm not sure yet. The way I do it is I go to the schools and I ask some very basic questions they know the answer to, and we ask GPT, and the answer usually, I mean, I check beforehand, but I search for hallucinations in ChatGPT's answers. So when they see it, when they see the answer, they're like, "Oh, how is this so wrong?" And that's kind of a bit of an eureka moment. And I'm like, it might be wrong on other things as well. So that's the way I approach critical thinking in 1 minute. The difficult thing about critical thinking is how do you assess it as well. It's really difficult. Also, critical thinking is like just asking, the teachers, like, where do you think ChatGPT is? Where does it exist? And then you realize that it's not as magical as that. And maybe before, finding a magical solution for climate change, maybe before it'll work towards it. So I don't know.
I think up for a second. I have confidence. Thank you. I think establishing critical thinking inside when you use AI with students, I think you have to do a lot before. So that's what you mentioned earlier. You really have to have a certain knowledge about AI in general. Where does it come from? How does it work? What are the advantages and what are the disadvantages? And you have kind of to gain a mindset where you have already like a tiny critical thinking spot in your head that you can still then apply when you use it. I think it's very important to have that right at the beginning, even before using it. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, usually I use very simple questions actually with the students. For example, it's always in situation, of course, that it makes sense to use one technology or not. So we take case studies, or we imagine situations. And the very simple questions are, why is technology or this technology useful in this situation? Are there some other alternatives? Actually, that would be maybe simpler. That would be simpler logistically, simpler in terms of skills asked to the students and so on. And from there, we can see by comparison with other technologies, why your technology is useful. It's really to train them to see some values in technology and not to take it as cash of educational innovation. Usually they tend to think that because they use technology, their teaching and the learning of their students will be better. It's really to deconstruct that. Technology can also impede learning when it's poorly used. And another way to do it is really to recontextualize technology, to show that it was designed by designers before appearing in the classroom, that choices were made, pedagogical choices that were not your choices. Does it fit with your context or not? Also to see that the students' reality outside the classroom is different, and so that they come into the classroom with different baggage about different skills, different comprehension and perceptions about technology. So recontextualized technology in its educational but also social context is usually helpful for students to take a step back and see what's behind this technology that they plan to use.
So we won't put the genie in the bottle, and we don't want to, because we see how interesting it's to interact with it. Don't know. But of course, we need, there's probably things to be done to prevent it from becoming dangerous. How to implement solutions that avoid pitfall. You talk about some of the problem AI produce, Simon, and I know that in Quebec we are trying to implement or thinking about solutions we still don't have in Europe, and maybe we don't want them in Europe, I don't know. Can you talk more about it?
About some pitfalls? Yeah. So first, my position is always to come back to what is teaching, what is learning, and basically it's highly relational matters. So remove the relationship from teaching and learning. You don't have teaching, you don't have learning. And we know that because there were a lot of experiments in distance education, particularly where the teaching role particularly was a bit let's say not very taken into account, and it was a complete failure. So that come back to how to make sure there is a social presence even in the online courses, because it doesn't work by itself. So from this, I think one of the pitfalls is to think that the pedagogical relationship can be mediatized or digitalized completely. I think it can't, because by being digitalized, it is quantified, whereas it is a highly qualitative experience that a teacher get with his students. So part of it can be quantified, digitalized, datafied, no problem, but not all of it. And following that, I think that AI can really inform about the pedagogical relationship between a teacher and a student, but to a certain extent only, and that this information is definitely not as rich as the one that a teacher gets about his students by being in interaction, human interaction with them. So the documentation, the information that AI can provide is precious. I think it's interesting, but never if it is seen as more objective or more neutral than the teaching experience, which would be supposedly more subjective. And that's usually, unfortunately, the way school administrators see AI. They say, oh, it's a way to go over the subjectivity of teachers and their argument for doing what they do. We can really have objective data. And I think it's wrong to think this way. So that would be one problem. I think the moment AI impedes teachers' judgment, I think it's a wrong use of AI. AI can definitely support teachers' judgment, never impede it. If it impedes it, for me, that's a sign AI is not being used correctly. And in education in Quebec, there are some attempts at the moment that could be interesting, but that are usually in this bias of overcoming, teachers' judgment. by a will to standardize, automatize several mechanisms. That really can't be because the schools and classrooms are diverse and quite singular, so you can't. It's hard to standardize, upfront and in all the directions. So, for example, there are some algorithms that are developed to prevent students drop out, which is very good. So it's based on different data collected by the machine. But most of the time, when a direction goes to teachers and say these students are about to drop out, teachers say, yeah, but we know that already. After a few weeks in the classroom, we know that. So that doesn't help. The question is rather, what do we do from there? And here the fear of some teachers is that they have new mandate, for example, to intervene to stop student dropout, but without more resources. And so the situation will be exactly the same. They already try in their daily interactions to tackle a student dropout, but they don't have the right condition to do that anyway. So there is just a certain amount of student dropout that they can prevent, not all of it. So usually solution is actually searched from a technological point of view, what we call technological solutionism, but actually the solution is clearly elsewhere. It's in working condition, resources, human resources, and so on.
So in computer science, we have a saying, there is no free lunch. Well, today there was one, but usually there is not one. Well, it wasn't free for me, I guess. I think we as a society, we will pay a price for the efficiency gains of AI. There are many risks already anticipated around AI, climate change, job loss, biases, disinformation, mental health, to name but a few. I see two main risks for AI in education. So the first one, so Jérôme largely talked about it in the previous panel discussion. For me, the first question that needs to be addressed is who is behind the development of educational AI systems? Are their economic goals well aligned to the educational goals and values of our school systems? And for me, the solution here is to co-construct these tools with the teachers in the field to avoid hidden political agendas being embedded in these tools. The second risk I see is a bit more philosophical, so bear with me. While generative AI magically makes us all of us and our students proficient in writing and illustration, opening up a whole new world of possibilities for sure, it also challenges the students' relationship to knowledge and learning. So I like the quote by Philippe Mérieux, who is an important figure in the field of education, who said that the danger of ChatGPT is that it satisfies the desire to know and kills the desire to learn. By the way, if you're not happy with this translation, you can blame my AI assistant. Instead of valuing hard work, AI is implicitly telling our students that it's okay to take someone else's work without their consent and without them taking any credit for it. So there's the issue of intrinsic motivation as well. What is going to motivate students to study for long hours to produce texts that are much worse than a machine in seconds? How do you tell a child to eat broccoli in a candy open bar? We all know how that ends. I believe the key is intrinsic motivation. So how do you do that? Learning has to make sense to students. They have to be convinced themselves that they need it. Not just for the piece of paper they have in the end. So we need to take the time to explain this to our students and be more transparent about why they're in school. Thank you, Microsoft. So students will probably need to reflect on their attitude to learning. It's a bit of an existential crisis, and focus more on the learning process and personal development rather than the performance. So for me, the core is really the pleasure of learning. If there's no pleasure in learning, we are done. The problems are easy to see. But most of these problems do not have easy solutions. As Andy pointed out earlier, it's easier said than done. And even if we could solve all these problems through the AI tool design, which hopefully we can avoid some of these pitfalls, human society is a complex system, and we humans can be very creative with how to divert new tools from their original use for which they were designed. So I think it's impossible to anticipate all the malicious or unintended side effects that AI will bring. And for me, it's really these unpredictable risks that worry me the most. So really, we talked about good intentions, but for me, good intentions are just not good enough. And as I'm totally with you with this, Isabel, with my co-panelists, the solutions really lie in the hands of people. It's those who create these tools, but also those who will use these tools, teachers and students. Let's not forget about them.
Okay. Well, there were already some issues mentioned. I'm gonna mention other issues, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about the solutions to the issues, because I think we can find a solution for each issue that is out there. What I want to talk first about, we mentioned it before, is student dropouts, for example. The whole perspective that we are taking is about it's a responsibility on students, and students want to cheat and they are going to cheat, etc. I think there are other important factors to consider, such as the communication, or what happens, why does a student really drop out? And there are issues in the communications from teachers, and so AI could actually improve those communications and reduce the biases as well. Teachers or doctors or examiners, everybody, we all have biases. We all communicate them through a non-verbal and our verbal behaviors, and also in the classroom. So that's where AI could really enhance the communication and maybe actually reduce student dropouts. So yeah, that's what I wanted to mention before. I think what's really important is AI shouldn't replace a teacher. That's already what my colleagues mentioned before. AI can assist, but even in replacing a teacher, there are more or less constraints. One main critic that we can have is like there's a lack of human interaction. So you have both sides. You can say, yeah, but at the beginning we have biases in human interaction that influence greatly students. So maybe AI could be a solution. But then we have like AI without human interaction, and then we get maybe rid of the biases, but then we lack some affective components or emotions that are quite important. But then there are solutions. For example, there are virtual tutors that are trained to display human affective behaviors. And if you compare virtual tutors that have human affective behaviors compared to those who don't have it, then you actually see that students can improve and can feel better with their learning experience. So there's always going to be one issue, and then there's going to be one solution afterwards. What you mentioned also both before, what is really important is which AI are we using and where does the data come from, and the idea to construct tools by, for example, higher education institutions or even teachers is a good solution for that. I just think that there are some unpredictable parts with education in AIs, but there are a lot of parts that can be made predictable by choosing the right tool at the right time for the student. And if a student wants to cheat with the AI, then they're going to do it. But they actually also did it before without AI. So they hired another student to do it. We know that happens for bachelor, master thesis, and also, but hopefully not that often, to a PhD thesis. So if you want to cheat, then you are going to cheat. But then I think it's kind of a way where we have to think about education and the underlying values about it. So what do we really want to teach? So If we give the opportunity to a student to sheet for like the whole exam, maybe the way we ask our questions in the exam and the educational purpose about the exam is not the right one. Maybe that's one thing that we have to change. For me, I'm just talking for me, there's no way around AI. And I think it has great advantages and great disadvantages. One other disadvantage could be, for example, the limit of understanding. So sometimes AI can lack a tailored explanation or can give not the right answers. But then also there could be the solution, as you mentioned before, having co-constructing tools from the university or from the teacher that are for the right context and give the right information at the right time. Yeah.
So from the audience.
Before the audience, I would like to ask a question, maybe a polemical one, but this is a panel. Biljana, you have said that the core in education is learning, and I agree. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a teacher also. But if we think what we learn at school and what we do in professional life, we don't know by heart the dictionary. In school, we taught us how to use a dictionary to have the meaning of words. When we do some programming in companies, we don't know how the syntax of all function in programming, and we know how to obtain the different function we need when we would like to program. And I heard this last month that the next generation of children maybe will be taught to use external tools as ChatGPT, for instance. How do you react with this?
It's a very interesting question, really. So one question that has been like torturing us since the beginning is like, do children still need to learn programming while having ChatGPT? ChatGPT can solve all of my programming exercises, like perfect. So, you know, is it still a good idea? I'll be very this is where I'm proactive. Is it still a good idea to spend years learning a foreign language when we have a little machine in our pocket that can instantly translate our discussions? So does one still need to drive, to continue on the driving car metaphor from before? Does one still need to know how to drive in order to take a seat in an automated car? I don't know. The problem with programming is that if you don't know how to program, when ChatGPT gives the answer, you can just, you know, close your eyes and blindly trust it. If you already know how to program, you don't necessarily need ChatGPT. That, for me, is the paradox. If you know how to program, you don't need it. If you don't know how to program, you use it, but then, like, you have to bear the consequences. The fun part about ChatGPT is that you're responsible for the bot's responses. So you have the legal right of what ChatGPT says to you, which is a bit odd because, you know, you don't have any control over it, direct control. So, you know, is it okay not to be able to summarize an article without the help of a machine? And then, to what extent, you know, can I trust that summary? You know, maybe I'm being manipulated. I don't know. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem. It's, you know, it's useful if I don't have the skill, but if I don't have the skill, I don't have the skill to you know, evaluate the answer from ChatGPT. So it's difficult. For me, we still need to teach programming because it's more about, you know, how to have logical reasoning and maybe, you know, being able to evaluate the quality of a code. You kind of need to understand what the code does and how it does it. But it has to be asked on a, you know, case by case basis.
Yep. In addition to what Biljana said, I would add that teaching and learning is about developing skills. We all agree with that, I think. But most of the time we develop specific skills, like for French, for mathematics, and so on. But by developing these skills, we also develop some transversal skills, critical thinking, synthesis thinking, problem solving, and so on. So we can't really just see education as preparation for the workplace and try to align the skills that we want to develop at school to be ready for work, because education develop more than that, and this more is also useful for I think the workplace and for the society in general. Still, the question is very interesting. It's about how the technological performance of a tool is adapted to the competence that we try to develop in our students. So with AI, we have a tremendously performant technology. And indeed, if they come and interfere with skills that we try to develop in the students, then we have a problem. But it's not a new problem, because we got the same question with calculate in mathematics, with automatic corrector with Word, okay, where when students start typing on the Word document and it was suggesting some mistakes, all the teachers were there, that doesn't work, because that will do the work that I asked my students to do. But so with time, we succeeded in using Word to make students write and to make good use of automatic correction when they have sufficient skills to make good use of it. So that's a question of alignment between what the tools is doing technically and with the competence of the student to make good use of the skill, or not, because he's not ready yet. He doesn't have the necessary skills to make good use of it.
Okay, so maybe I continue with two questions. How does the suggestion of about students using ChatGPT for learning and for feedback reconcile with what we discussed this morning about the capability of ChatGPT to generate hallucination? And a second question is quite related. Isn't it the role of the teacher to adapt regarding that?
Yeah, ChatGPT and hallucinations are very, very interesting. I think if you have a specific educational purpose, and you know the issues and the underlying biases that, for example, ChatGPT has, then you shouldn't use ChatGPT for this educational purpose. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use AI and chatbots in general. You should just use the right one. And how we get the right one, but the right one can be programmed. It can be programmed by based on scientific data and research. It can also be programmed on teacher experiences and on current errors that we have. So we actually have the problem with the hallucinations in ChatGPT or inventing stuff. But then we could have the solution of creating own chatbots based on AI in education that could help prevent those hallucinations and biases.
We still have questions online, but if you have some questions in the room and the mic in the room.
Okay, I can.
Hello, hi. Very nice discussion, thank you. I was wondering, I think it's a bit in the topic. I was wondering if you believe there's a need to develop an AI tool specifically for teaching, maybe in a collaboration between AI designers, teachers, even students. And if so, what would some of the conditions or restrictions in this tool to be able to be used for education?
Well, I'm working on the tool, so I'm not going to too much detail. Yes, Yeah, we definitely need an AI tool based about interaction, and what should it be based on? As I mentioned before, a lot of the literature lays out all the biases that we can have interacting with each other. So actually having an AI tool that that does not incorporate those biases is already a teaching effect, a positive one. I think there it's really, really important that we have computer scientists, and that we have like teachers, and that we have researchers, and all of them working together. Because you need the product, and have like different specialists from every point. And just if they communicate in an efficient way, then you can have a nice product, but then you still have to sell it.
Yeah, I agree completely with Nida. It's really, as a computer scientist, I've been on the development side, and we tend to forget who the product is for, and that's why a lot of the products do not work in the classroom, because usually they're imagined in several computer scientists' brains, and they think, they project a lot of things onto the classroom, and they imagine it will work and it'll be super, and then they go to the classroom and it just doesn't pick up, and it's a lot of effort that kind of disappears, vanishes in the air, which is a shame. And for me, really, you need this communication between the partners that are interested in the tool. But AI, tools are by definition useful, and an AI tool is definitely useful. And the way, for example, AI has been very useful in edtech, in the newest wave of edtech, is that you can talk to the tool. So basically, there's this really nice app where children learn how to read, by talking to the tool. They read the text, and then the AI says, no, this was wrong, or can you please repeat this word? And which is nice, because kids cannot read. So it's the only way to interact with one of these apps. So this is one way AI could be very useful, and it's already actually very useful.
Yeah, and to reach these compatibilities, strong compatibility between technology and the classroom, in my ideal educational system, AI would be developed within the school system or by educational researchers. Most of the time, it's not the case. So it's developed by companies. And indeed, within the design process, the pedagogical perspective, which for me should be first all along, is in competition with many other constraints, financial and so on, that are obvious and that they have to deal with. So that the product at the end is not necessarily suited for education, but is particularly true, for example, for ChatGPT. ChatGPT has not been thought as an educational technology. When it's not the case, indeed, teachers have to think about the way they can use this non-educational technology in an educational purpose, which is which make the adoption process longer for them, contrary to some other educational technologies, proper educational technologies like smart boards. Smart boards, teachers have no problem in adopting them and using the different functions that it can add to the traditional whiteboard, because it's an educational technology that has been thought for the classroom from this perspective. So I think really this idea of putting pedagogy first by actors that know about pedagogy is a great starting point to develop relevant AI in education.
From what my bad ears could get, I understand there is a certain ambiguity between AI for teaching as a tool and AI teach AI. Don't you think one can reach both goals at the same time by asking unsolvable questions like the following? I'm going to give 4 instances of, if you ask a student to fancy, not to develop, that would be too long, fancy an algorithm to address the following question. How does one translate AI into all the UN languages plus ancient Vedic? That's one example. How do you fancy an algorithm assessing the redundancy of the first 3 SDGs? How do you develop an algorithm to rank the value of school knowledge? And last, how do you develop an algorithm to rate how stupid your teacher is? Don't you think that I intentionally use very simple, childish, and a bit provocative instances, but it's just to exemplify? Don't you think that this approach would both give students quite unexpected questions with AI as a tool, and at the same time teach them how efficient but also tricky AI could be?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, these are great case study that we could use with students for what we call digital education or media education, which is already happening in school, and where we try to train students from case studies or situations exactly like that, which are very interesting, to get one step back from the machine, not using it as they would, but using it in some context or in some cases where it brings some complexity or some paradoxes, and that make them think about the tool that they are using usually in another way, in a more productive way. That's a reflexive way to bring them some critical thinking, I think. Yes.
I think it's the way to go at the university level. In high school, we're more at what it's an algorithm level. But the challenge is really to go about it in a non-mathematical way. So if there's a way, I mean, there are ways now, it's starting to be accessible, but that's kind of the challenge. So at the university, it's definitely feasible, but a bit lower, it's a bit more complicated. But for sure, it's very relevant.
Hi, I have a question. So since you're all teachers and you interact with teachers and you know teachers, do you think if there was a magic tool that could reliably detect AI-generated content, for instance, AI-generated text, do you think teachers would like that?
I think some of them would love it. Most of them. Yeah. I think for a lot of teachers, author rights are quite important. So who produces the knowledge? Where does it come from? So checking with AI how to, if it's written from AI or other. A lot of teachers are actually doing it at the moment. So it happens already, but then the AI software is not really reliable, which is an issue. So I think the issue is in how can you create a software that truly captures if it's generated by AI or not, but then should be probably based on other materials that the students uploaded before, and then maybe you could train the software or whatever. But then also you have ethical issues, because there are different, now I think in different universities coming into place, and also in science and with reviewers in general, where you do not have the right to upload a personal file or personal text from a student to an AI server, because then you lose like it's not your rights, it's the rights from the student. So actually what happens in if you want to write an article for some publishers, and if you are a reviewer, you do not have the right to use AI to check if it's used by AI. So there are like still some other issues going around there. And then still the question is, if you have to use AI to check if it's used by AI, what was really the true educational purpose of the exercise?
I think we all need this tool, not just me as a teacher, it's me as a human. Because if you think about what industrialization brought, it's a mass production of tons of objects that end in landfills. And basically, I'm kind of worried about what is very proficient content creation will do to human knowledge in itself.
Yeah, I think the question is very good. I think though that given the workload of the teachers, the magic tool should be probably integrated to the software where students hand in their papers, so that teachers don't have to even download the papers to check. But I think more generally that indeed, because of all the discussion we've had since this morning, that the presence or the use of AI should be clearly indicated wherever it's happening and what does it do. I think that's could be the case here, but more globally to be aware that an AI tool is being used when I'm doing this or that is something that we could systematize.
Just to follow up, I ask because it's one thing to sort of encounter the technology as it exists now, but it's also really useful, especially, you know, if you're sort of like talking with a particular constituency of users, like teachers or students or something, to surface kind of desiderata, to surface what would be good, to surface kind of demands or requirements or requests, rather than just confront the technology that exists. We can ask, for instance, the companies or lawmakers, we would like it to be like this, and then it would be better. A lot of the good things that you're talking about, for instance, curriculum design and stuff like that, wouldn't be harmed at all if there was a detector. You can, you know, all of the good things you're talking about would still exist. But the issues of, you know, needing to validate that this really comes from a student, that would be nicely addressed by a detector. So I think if there is some method for sort of aggregating the desiderata of users or community of users, and bringing that up to policymakers or companies, that would be a very useful thing.
Yeah, but most designers would probably tell you that that's already what they think they're doing. Usually they go to school, they teach to teachers, they also do test users and so on. But at the end of the day, they develop a technology for the average student or the average teachers, and with some constraint during the design process. So it ends up, being a technology that is with some constraints and so on, and it doesn't reach actually the.
But don't you think that even the average teacher would want to have this magic detector tool if it was reliable? Do you think
that could be? But for example, if it was a separate tool where they have to download it to check, it would already be a turn off for some. So it's really in the details. Then we can design these things. But to come back to my proposition, if they were developed within the school systems, it would be based on the teachers' needs, and it would be pedagogy first oriented, and I think it would really help.
Thank you.
Hi again. At some point, when we were talking about students using AI for cheating, and you said that maybe if we can use an AI tool to cheat an whole exam, maybe the exam is not built well. So my question would be, what kind of structure of exam will we need in this case if AI becomes a normality in our education?
I think before deciding which structure of the exam or other, I think we should decide on what we want to teach. And once we have made this decision, then I think we can structure the IA tools and everything accordingly. But I think that's like a whole other bigger picture question. So what people should or not learn, and what should they want or not to learn. And I think it's also this perspective where we have to rethink about the educational purpose in general. And maybe we are going to lose some educational purposes using AI in the future, but I think we can gain a lot. So I think it's all about thinking about the new possibilities and new skills that we could gain using it, rather than just only focusing on the skills that we could lose. And then if we decided on the skills that are really important to teach at schools or at the university level, then we could construct the right exercises for French, the right learning materials for students. So that's what would then be the step afterwards.
I would like to make a remark to your question, the gentleman in the yellow shirt. OpenAI actually opened such a classifier. It was called New AI Classifier for Indicating AI Written Text in January. And they approached the educational sector to test it, but they already knew that the accuracy is very, very low, and they started just recently again. So this is already happening, I guess, what you were indicating.
Yes, yeah, that's true. And it's a good effort, but I think that they could do a lot better and make a reliable tool. And I think this should be a requirement or a duty on the manufacturers. So I guess it needs to be quite good, but I think that that's a possibility. You know, technically it's possible.
It would be great if they could serve poison and then the anti-poison at one time. Yeah.
Exactly.
From the technical point of view about this magic system, maybe I can explain for those that do not know the system. Those systems for the moment work on analyzing the word distribution within a text and compare those word distribution according to the distribution in language models. And one difficulty is that when a student or people change the words within the generated text, and therefore you change the distribution of the text, and therefore this is very difficult to have a comparison with the generated text, the probability distribution in the language model. They are actually current academic work working on watermarking the generated text, but I think they need more time. I think there were questions there.
Yeah. Coming back to this long-standing issue in education that you mentioned earlier, that we want them to learn and have transversal skills, but we actually grade them on performance, right? This is a very poor proxy for the lack of a better incentive to. So AI makes this more evident, this problem. So I'm wondering, are there, and this is maybe an opportunity now, every challenge has an opportunity to completely remodel the way we do education, maybe even use AI as a tool for that.
Yeah, I completely agree that assessment takes a too big place in education right now, particularly and more actually, because schools are more and more in competition, because data is collected, then classified school accordingly and so on. So teachers are more and more encouraged to prepare their students to pass an exam that is happening at the end of the year, but they will train them all along. So teaching for the test is a reality that is unfortunately increasing in a context where assessment was already taking too much of a role. So we are not going the right way. I think though that it can be possible to change the way we assess students and to diminish it. But for that, we need to change teachers' working conditions and the conditions of teaching. Teachers can do many things and they would like to do many things, but the working conditions at the moment are really not going in a good way for them, at least in Quebec, but I think it's a bit worldwide. School inequalities are also increasing, which is getting the schools and the teachers into some problems that were not so at the forefront before. It's really difficult for them to have a very, very thin margin to develop new practices, to test them and so on. I think the point is really to improve the teaching conditions, and then they can really grade differently, grade less, but teach more, and so it would be the key, with or without AI, but I would start with that.
There's one thing I really love about GPT is that it is a certified advanced sommelier. So I think that maybe it will be a consequence of the fact that certification will be devalued. You know, if it's too easy to pass a certain exam, it'll lose of its value. So then we'll be forced to kind of reassess this way of, this system. So it might be imposed by these external conditions, but I think if it happens, it will be externally rather than internally.
I have just something little to add about remodeling education in general. If we look at education and the fields that we teach to our students, most of them are going to land in the private sector. So we have a lot of people that are going to be working, I don't know, as a manager, for example, or other fields. And then we also have to look at not only at the educational sector, but also at the private sector. What are the needs of the private sector and what is really going on in the working force? And if the demand in the working force is to have AI prompt generators, then we should also give the opportunities to our students to have the right skills to achieve such positions and new jobs. So it's really also like looking what's going on in the private sector, what are the new jobs that are going to be out there, and then looking at the education system, how can we appropriately teach them, and then how we teach them. That's all. Yeah, another big question about the tools, etc. But it's also always relying to what's going on academia.
Thank you.
Okay. Last question then.
Maybe we take a last one, or maybe you have one online.
And I have one online, and then we can. So there is one here.
Okay, and the one online, and we close. Thank you.
So actually, my thing is in line with the student uses of the AI. So before I come to my main point, I have two things. One thing is that we learn things by doing. And another thing is when we should take help, like while we are learning the thing, or once I learned the thing, for example, programming, and then I take help to improve my efficiency. So, and if I think from the teaching point of view, so then as a teacher, my duty is to improve the skill of students. So if I know the content that they're coming up with is their original, then I know the status of a student and I know how to improve their skill, because every student needs, they are not same. They need different way of every student I will deal differently depending on their output, whatever they are giving me. So if everyone comes with the AI generated content, I will see everyone is okay, fine. So am I doing my duty perfectly? That's what my
I'm going to try answering half of your questions. You mentioned learning. When should students use AI in which part of the learning process? For example, should it be more like in the beginning, or should it be more during, or should it be more afterwards? And how can we make sure that students learn things not in a bad way? It gets tricky because there are always general ways of teaching, but then there are always specific needs of students. So for some students, it would be good to familiarize them with AI models or chatbots at the beginning of the learning curve. Some would be better at the end of it, but then it also depends on the motivation of the student. So it can be that somebody's not ready to use it, so then you have to teach it. You can help them later on in the learning process. So or maybe once they finish the an exercise. But for some others who are already have more knowledge about AI and are motivated, they can really start using it at the beginning. So it really depends on how does the student wants to use it or not. And then on the other side, it is what as a teacher do you insist on about the educational purposes about your course. So you could also impose using AI from the beginning, and then you would just impose it, and student would have to deal with all of it in a certain way. But it really depends in some cases, but then for each specific case, there can be a solution.
Okay, I have
just a small thing. So I'm not concerned about using AI while learning, it's fine. But when I give the assignment, then they're coming up with their original thing or not. So my main point was only on this thing. Using AI while learning, it's fine as they're asking question, they're learning. It's perfectly fine. But the main concern is whenever I give the assignment, are they coming up with the original content? Only then, like otherwise, like while learning, if they are doing this thing, because while learning, answering the assignment, they should not use the AI. They should come up with the original content. Their own brain, whatever comes up.
When we think about the assignment, I think there should be assignments where you should use AI. So it's really about the assignment.
I think assignment is about your own capability. The main motivation of assignment, I think I will break the motivation of assignment if I use the AI.
But then it is assignment. What is the underlying educational purpose of the assignment? If the assignment is to have creative thinking and writing a novel, and then you should, and then you're using AI, then it's not the right goal. But if the assignment is about an educational purpose where you have to use AI because you are going to use it frequently in your new job, then using AI is the right answer. So it depends on the assignment.
Okay. I will skip the last question and I move forward to the conclusion, otherwise we will be late for the next session. Just I would like to mention that we didn't discuss about children with disabilities, and also we have a huge potential also with AI for them in terms, for instance, for autism, to model other kind of interactions when the interaction with a human are difficult. Also in terms of modeling of semantics, we have identified that the way of modeling, for instance, a plane in our mind is kind of mix of a tool that fly with a motor, and then we can have this in semantic space I presented this morning, and therefore having this kind of representation in the semantic space can also help to explain the different concepts that can be difficult to capture from some children. I would like to thank all the three panel for this great talk, you also for the question and the audience, and thank you also, Isabel, for this collaboration in building this panel. Thank you.